Hello everybody, welcome back to Fundamentals of Physical Geography. In this unit we're talking about landscapes and geomorphic process environments, and there are a number of big points that I want you to have in your head as we embark on this part of the module. The first point is that you've learnt lots of facts, lots of bits and pieces of information so far. It's really important that you realise that as well as understanding those facts and those points of information, you need to understand how they tie together into a story. It's one thing knowing that fact, and knowing that fact, and knowing that fact, etc., and maybe even knowing a few details or examples or subsidiary information about those facts. That's all very well, but what really matters is that as well as that, you can somehow tie those together into a coherent story, and you can see the connections around that kind of diagram. We've been talking about systems lately. You want to try to see your knowledge of the subject almost as a system in which you can recognise connections between the different components of your knowledge, and those connections add up to a story, a big picture understanding of what's going on, as well as the little facts, as well as the little details. And in the coursework essay, for example, that you're doing, you won't just be required to give me some bits of fact. You'll be required to answer a question which involves tying those bits of information together to create an argument or a story backed up by evidence that hangs together as a coherent whole. So that's the first thing I want to emphasise today, is that you should be able to tell a story as well as knowing the individual facts that go to make up that story. The second thing I want to focus on today is the idea of landscape, but particularly the fact that the landscape that you see around you, the hills and the valleys, that is controlled by something we call a process environment. What do I mean by that? Well, you already know from what we've talked about before that landforms result from the action of processes at and close to the Earth's surface. And we've talked about the Earth's surface, the energy inputs onto the materials, the action of processes creating features or forms. So landforms and landscapes relate to the operation of process, but where do those processes come from? Well, they're driven by energy impacting on the material within that broader environment. And so the nature of that environment determines the nature of the processes, which determines the nature of landforms. So in a glacial setting, or a hot arid setting, or a tropical humid setting, those different environmental conditions with perhaps different geologies and different atmospheric circulation patterns, different temperature regimes, all those environmental settings control the processes that drive the features. So we talk about processes and environments as a connected unit, if you like, a process environment. And so you would associate certain processes with certain environments. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about in this session. Now, as you can see from my little sketch there already, what's going on in your local process environment driving your processes to make your individual features of the landscape? Well, those local conditions are being controlled by the big global situation. The reason why this is going on here is because of things going on at a planetary scale. Things we've talked about before, like the global circulation, the Earth's radiation balance, the energy budget for the planet as a whole. Those big scale things are driving local scale things. And I know that's something that a lot of you are looking at in your assessment for this module. You're looking at that idea of local situations being driven by global conditions. And that's something very much to bear in mind when you're thinking about landscapes and geomorphology. So be aware of the big picture as well as the local outcomes of that big picture. Now, one of the consequences of that is that as this big global picture changes over time, for example, if we start thinking about environmental change, climate change, sea level change and so on, well, those changes in the big picture, those are going to lead to changes in these details as well. So long-term change in these surrounding, driving environmental factors are going to lead to long-term changes in these local conditions as well. So landscape change isn't only related to the operation of processes over time, it's also related to change in the environmental conditions that determine those processes over the course of time. So there's lots going on there. And what we're starting to talk about in here, the the whole area of landforms and landscapes being created and changed by processes, well, we call that geomorphology. Geomorphology is the science of landforms, landscapes, the processes by which they're created, and the processes that change them over time. And geomorphology is a really important part of physical geography, and it's something that we're going to talk about, well, several times over the next few sessions in this module, because it's an important part of this module as well. So those are some of the issues that I'd like you to be thinking about as we work through the remainder of this unit.